The philosophy of integrated pest management, IPM, was developed in the 1950s because of concerns over increased pesticide use, environmental contamination, and the development of pesticide resistance. IPM is an ecosystem-based strategy that focuses on long-term prevention of pests or their damage through a combination of techniques such as biological control, habitat manipulation, modification of cultural practices, and use of resistant varieties. Pesticides are used only after monitoring indicates they are needed according to established guidelines, and treatments are made with the goal of removing only the target organism. Pest control materials are selected and applied in a manner that minimizes risks to human health, beneficial and non-target organisms, and the environment. I'm Dr. DeBusk, and this video focuses on the steps of IPM. The following 5 practices are common to all IPM programs. 1. Identify pests correctly. 2. Monitor and scout pests. 3. Follow control action guidelines. 4. Prevent pest problems. And 5. Use different IPM practices together. Integrate. IPM is commonly used in agricultural crop production where the economic thresholds for key pests have been determined. Using IPM in the urban environment, however, has been more challenging. The green industry is sensitive to aesthetic damage, and customers are often intolerant of anything that could affect the appearance of ornamental plants. Increased education of growers, consumers, and maintenance personnel could raise the aesthetic threshold and allow for minor damage without compromising plant health and beauty. First, determine the identification of the pests. Most pest management practices, including pesticide use, are effective only against certain species of pests. Because of this, you must know which pests are causing the problem before you choose a management practice. You need to identify pests correctly to determine the pests present, determine the pest's life cycle, and know which life cycle to target. For example, an insect pest, whether it is an egg, larva or nymph, pupa or adult, and determine potential damage they may cause. Scouting or monitoring is one of the most important tools of any IPM program. The timely detection of pests and accurate assessment of population densities of the pests and their natural enemies are fundamental to IPM decision-making. Early detection of pests enables the manager to reduce plant damage, improve plant quality, reduce production costs, avoid production delays, and increase profits. Continuous pest monitoring and accurate record keeping help predict when pests most frequently occur and will increase the ability to anticipate and schedule activities related to pest management. Detection should be followed closely with appropriate controls when necessary to prevent pest outbreaks. Scouting provides the overview and the raw data by which preventative and pest management options are chosen. Pest management systems cannot be implemented if a manager does not know which pests exist and whether populations are significant. Therefore, a scouting plan must be devised for each site. To be successful, scouting must be performed routinely and consistently. Knowledge of the plant and its pests forms the background for successful monitoring. Several prerequisites must be satisfied to implement a successful monitoring program. The scout must do the following: divide the site into logical units and make maps of these units so that all areas can be efficiently monitored on a routine basis. Communicate pest and plant species information clearly and consistently to those responsible for acting on that information. Define key plants and pests, such as azalea and azalea lacebugs, with your clients. Both the client and the manager must agree on those plants that are key plants for purposes of routine scouting. The frequency of monitoring is determined by pest trends, desired level of aesthetics, and the cost of pest control. During periods when turf grass and landscape plants are actively growing or pests are active, you may have to monitor more often. When lawns and other plants are dormant or growth is slow, scouting may be less frequent. Look for abnormal plant symptoms, direct evidence of insects, mites, or pathogen signs, and situational problems such as malfunctioning sprinkler heads. Walk at random through the landscape area in a zigzag pattern. Make an effort to select those plants that appear less healthy for visual inspection. In other words, conduct bias sampling. Examine foliage for signs of trouble, checking both new and old growth, but predominantly the new growth. Examine both leaf surfaces, especially the undersides, and also the leaf axils for large insects and symptoms of foliar nematodes and diseases. Use a hand lens to facilitate observation of the smaller pests such as mites and thrips, or the reproductive signs of fungal pathogens. During individual plant inspection, strike the foliage over a white sheet of paper or a paper plate to dislodge small pests, primarily mites and thrips, for easier viewing. When problem spots are identified, increase the number of plants inspected in those areas. Yellow sticky traps, cups, plates, or cards that attract and capture whiteflies, aphids, thrips, and leaf miner flies are valuable aids in monitoring for early invasions and serve as an index of activity for these pests. Placed just above the plant canopy. Determine a rough count of plants with symptoms of disease or insect injury. It is also important to look closely at certain problem areas, such as weedy spots. Control action guidelines will help you decide how to avoid possible losses from pest damage. How many pests and how much damage are acceptable or tolerable. Control action guidelines include aesthetic injury levels, treatment thresholds, and timing. An aesthetic injury level, AIL, can help you decide when pests need control. Aesthetic means how good or nice something appears. The AIL is a level of pest damage or number of pests the general public or a customer will tolerate on a plant or landscape. Aesthetic tolerances depend on the person and where the damage is on the plant or turf grass and where it is in the landscape. For example, people may tolerate some pest damage to plants in the background of a landscape. They may be less tolerant of pest damage to plants in places easily seen. Some people do not want to see any insects or weeds or damage. This may not bother others at all. Educating customers can help them become more tolerant of pests and their damage. You may use treatment thresholds to decide when to control a pest. The treatment threshold refers to the number of pests on the plants or certain plant parts. If pests reach this number, begin control measures to prevent reaching the AIL. Sometimes, though, you may have to treat certain pests well before the damage appears. You may need to control pathogens that cause disease before they begin developing. If you do not, they will develop and spread rapidly if the environment is favorable. Highly maintained landscapes have a lower aesthetic threshold. Nothing can be out of place. Because of this, action may be necessary sooner and more often. Landscapes kept at much lower maintenance levels have higher aesthetic thresholds. These areas do not need treatment as often, if any at all. How quickly you need to act to reduce pests will also assist your decision making. Pesticides generally kill more pests faster than natural enemies, but natural enemies will suppress pests for the long term better than pesticides. Thresholds do not always indicate when the treatments are most effective. For example, a fungicide must cover the plant surface to protect the plant prior to fungal infection. Leaves that appear after treatment may not be protected from fungi. More fungicide applications may be necessary to protect the new growth. Certain stages of a pest's life cycle influence the effectiveness of pesticides. It is important that you use pesticides and other management practices at the time when they are most effective against pests. To determine the proper times to use pesticides, become knowledgeable of the most susceptible stages of the pest's life cycle. For example, treatment for June bugs is most effective between July and early September when the larvae are small and closer to the soil surface. Another example, scale insects are often noticed after plant damage appears, such as leaf yellowing or dieback. An insecticide applied after damage appears is often ineffective. The most effective treatment timing for many scale species is when the young nymphs are active. The wax on their bodies protects older nymphs and adults from insecticides that contact them. Horticultural oil can control scales at any stage by suffocating them. The most effective time to apply this oil is when plants are dormant or when temperatures are below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In general, insecticides are most effective on young, immature insect pests. To prevent pest problems, you can plant pest-resistant plants and grass or change the landscape. One of the most dependable methods to prevent problems is to plant pest-resistant turfgrass cultivars. Pest-resistant plants and turfgrass are very effective cultural controls. This method is very useful in the management of plant pathogens, nematodes, and some insects. Examples include certain rose cultivars that resist powdery mildew and black spot, the dwarf Yetta cultivar of Indian hawthorn that resists Entomosporium leaf spot disease, and some crepe myrtles that resist powdery mildew disease. Pest resistance is also somewhat useful with insect pests. Pest resistance is long-term, is cost-effective, and does not require special equipment. Make alterations to the landscape so that it does not attract pests. Reduce food, water, and shelter that attracts pests. Install plants in the landscape that attract the natural enemies of pests. Cultural, biological, physical or mechanical, genetic, and chemical controls are all IPM practices. Use them as necessary to help prevent problems and keep pest numbers down. I hope you learn more about the steps of IPM. In the next video, each of the IPM practices will be discussed in more detail.